Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds Edge to Edge Transformation. And as always, I want to learn about what's happening in every part of the world, how much the changes that are going on technologically are affecting people, and how they are responding, how they are creating change. And one of the drivers of this transformation in India is Professor V. Ramgopal Rao. I really got to know him from LinkedIn and from many of our common acquaintances. It's a privilege for me to hear about Professor Rao's journey. Please tell us a little bit about yourself so that we all get to know a little bit about your journey, sir.
Thank you very much, Shankar Hemadiji. Thanks for talking to me. I started my career from a remote village in Telangana, that's known as Kollapur, and I actually studied until my 12th standard, full 17 years in that town, in that small little town, and in Telugu medium. I had no exposure to English until I finished my 12th, my entire schooling. So from that Telugu medium, the only option available for me at that time was the local entrance exam for engineering, and that's what I took. And then I did my BTech from Kakatiya University. And after that, I joined IIT Bombay for my microelectronics masters. And so that is how, in fact, that is where my career began. And I came in contact with some of the best people, like some of the names you mentioned. You worked with Professor Chandorkar. I worked. He also taught me. I worked with Professor Vasi, so he was my teacher too. And I, after my masters, then I continued with him for a PhD because I was so impressed with Professor Vasi that I wanted to stay with him. But then I got an offer from Munich in Germany, from a university there. In about 2 years' time, I got my doctor engineer degree. And after my PhD, then I moved to UCLA for my postdoctoral research. I spent a couple of years there. At that time, I worked with Professor Vishwanathan. Professor Vishwanathan was a very well-known professor. He passed away recently at a very old age, but he was a great man. I worked with him, and I also worked with Professor Jason Wu in UCLA. So after a couple of years, I got an offer from IIT Bombay to join as a faculty member. So I'm talking of 1998, exactly this month, 25 years ago, I joined IIT Bombay as a faculty member, as an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering. So I became a colleague of Professor Vasi, Professor Chandorkar, and others. And I continued in IIT Bombay for full 18 years as a faculty member. And in 2016, I left IIT Bombay to join IIT Delhi as the director. And there I spent 6 years as a director. And then I continued for one more year as a faculty member. And after that, Kumar Mangalam Birla, he was our chairman board of governors at IIT Delhi. When I was the director, I was reporting to the board and he was the chairman. And so he persuaded me to join BITS Pilani system. So I joined BITS Pilani in March this year, 2023. I am looking after the BITS Pilani campuses. We have 5 campuses now. And so I am particularly interested in the higher education system, the policy changes, what are the sort of things that we need to change in India. I write regularly for Times of India, and I write for the Sunday Times. I also closely follow what is happening world over in the higher education space, the learnings that we can have from all these systems, and I think it has been a very interesting journey so far.
You know, Professor, one of the things that made me call you, write to you, and say, could we talk, is your heart to heart connection. I've seen so many students of IIT Delhi and even faculty members say, oh my God, he's moved on. And there's this deep connection you have at a personal level, at a professional level. Can you talk about that? That's not very common in engineering. How did you become who you are today?
I think it must have be because of my upbringing. I, you know, I was in a very rural kind of a setting where the personal connections were all that mattered. We practically knew everybody in my town, and so that probably was quite deep rooted that way. That I am happy when I am with people, when I am in the company of people I trust, and I am a very trusting kind of a person. Uh, I I think that has been the way it has been. So I think probably it is my upbringing. 17 years in a small town kind of a setting. Uh, you know, I think that must be the reason, and I'm very connected to the roots. I still go to my place. I visit the schools where I have come from. I support them in all possible ways. I connect with children there. So that's my passion, in fact. So, I mean, I do realize that all of us are born differently. We all have our own personal advantages, disadvantages to start with, and life, doesn't treat everybody fairly. And there are so many people who are very talented in these rural areas, who need that guidance, somebody to handhold. So I want to be that person always for anyone who comes in contact with me, because all these positions and whatever we have achieved, it's nothing really is individual kind of a thing. We have all been helped by somebody at some point in time, and there are so many things that happen in life, which are not even in our control, right? And I think taking personal credit for all of that, whatever we have become, I think is unfair for anyone. I mean, there are the circumstances, the kind of a platforms that have been provided to us, the number of people who have helped us in our careers. I think if we just think back, all of that, and if you start connecting the dots, you can only connect the dots by looking backward, not by looking forward. So when you look backward and connect all the dots, you realize that there are so many people who have played a role. I think that makes you humble, grateful, and I think the more you think about it, the the more grateful you become, and that's also probably a way to be happy. So the and if somebody starts taking that view that it's me, me, myself, I have made my career, all that, then you become arrogant, and I think that cuts you off from people, and I don't want to be that person. And I think that gratitude, gratefulness, I believe, are very, very important in life, and everybody must realize that so many people helped us along the way, and we also need to do the same for so many others. I think that's how it has to be.
Professor Rao, what you're saying rings true totally for me. Professors you mentioned, Professor Chandorkar and Professor Vasi, Professor Isaac, J.R. Isaac, they were my mentors on campus. And truly, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have continued. I mean, I'm so grateful for the work you're doing to be there for people. I've seen that you have a keen interest in seeing India develop in technology, even in rural areas, and your contributions seem to be many. Could you get into that? Could you tell us a little bit about how much you have seen change and how you've been able to support some of these changes at the academic institutions and other places?
I got exposed to research and in the micro nano electronics areas in my master's at IIT Bombay, and I did my master's thesis with Professor Vasi. I worked on radiation hard technologies for Indian space applications, and so that technology got transferred to a foundry here, Semiconductor Complex Limited, and all that. So I got exposed to the technologies which can impact society. In this particular case, space technologies. Way back, when I was doing my masters in 89 to 91, and then after my PhD and all of that, I came back and joined India, joined IIT Bombay. And but my the problems I started working was still the problems that I was working in the US. I brought back those samples, and I worked with Intel very closely for a very long time. as part of various projects. So I wrote lots of papers with Intel researchers. And so that continued even after I joined IIT Bombay. But around 2005, 2006 kind of a time frame, I took a very conscious decision that, if I want to work for Intel, I could have stayed back in the US, and I need not have come back to India. After all, it did not connect very well, all those dots. And I thought, while I would like to be connected with all these big multinationals, work for these industries, I thought, I should also be doing something which can impact the society around me. So that is when I started to consciously look for problems in the society in India and see if I can, develop solutions for some of these problems. Because I've always taken this view that engineering is all about solving the problems. Engineering is not about electrical, mechanical. These are all disciplines that we have artificially created for administrative reasons. But engineering is all about solving problems, and that is the kind of a way I look at engineering. And so I took this decision of working on societal problems. So I then, but when the moment I wanted to do that, I realized that it highly becomes multidisciplinary. I cannot alone solve these problems with my double background. Then I started building these multidisciplinary groups at IIT Bombay. In fact, the first ever large multidisciplinary project ever undertaken at IIT Bombay was, in our group with me as the PI, and then with some of my colleagues, where I participated as an investigator. So that kind of a culture we started at IIT Bombay. We took a project. The very first project we took was a cardiac diagnostic kind of a system. So we wanted to be known as solution providers to, predicting heart attacks and early screening of heart problems and that sort of a project. And I'm being an electrical engineer, that required a lot of cooperation from other colleagues, and which is what we were able to successfully do. We developed the technology, then we started a company, NanoSniff, and we transferred this technology to NanoSniff. After we transferred the technology to NanoSniff, we started working on an explosive detection because we wanted to develop a very low cost technology to protect airports and the malls and every other place, because security started becoming a big threat for India. Everywhere you go, there was a fear of bomb blasts and all of that. So when that became an issue, then we started working on the explosive detection. That is one technology which we could successfully develop, commercialize. Again, we transferred the technology to the same company, NanoSniff. And NanoSniff, in this particular case, because it was did not require all those hospitals and medical doctors and all that, was able to successfully develop the technology. We transferred it to them at a proof of concept stage. They took it forward and make it into a complete product, released that product. Now multiple airports in India are actually using the technology. And so that has been a very successful sort of a technology development project, which took full 10 years, but it is the world's first microsensor based technology. All other technologies you see are spectroscopy and those sort of things, which are very expensive. Ours was a MEMS, a micro electromechanical system based technology, which is very low cost, and which is as good as anything that you can do with any other platform, and it's a totally disruptive technology in the market. So we now win all the tenders and any bid where we compete with the best, but at a much lower price, and we have no competition in the world now. So that has been a game changer in the explosive detection space. I am sure it will pick up momentum, and the world over it will become popular and known. And so after that, I moved into the agricultural sensors, and there again, I started my second company, that was Soil Sense. And Soil Sense has also been able to successfully commercialize an NPK sensor, a nitrate, phosphate, potassium, and then we are also working on other nutrients for the soil. It's like a glucometer for the soil, and that technology is also out in the market and selling well. So these two companies that I started, NanoSniff and Soil Sense, I was instrumental in starting them. But of course, there are co-founders. There are so many people who have contributed to that, and more importantly, the students who worked on those projects with me as a PhD students, they moved to the companies as CEO, and then they built a team, and all the credit goes to them for the successful commercialization of these technologies. And my other area of research, the CMOS, the nano electronics, the ones which drive all the commercial ICs and everything. That there I worked with all these big companies, Intel and others, and that technology has also, we filed at least a dozen patents with Intel. And in fact, Intel has given me officially in writing that the IP that we transferred to Intel is used in hundreds of millions of chips now that they sell worldwide. We worked on a system on chip integration, high voltage functionality on the core CMOS, and that technology, the DEMOS, some of those platforms we developed and optimized for Intel are now there in hundreds of millions of chips sold worldwide. So that was also very satisfying and a very productive collaboration with Intel. So I think on both the fronts, whether it is impacting the semiconductor, the systems or semiconductor markets through Intel collaboration, or developing technologies for the societal need in India, I think it has been pretty satisfying. And so I am now continuing most of my research currently is into the sensors, the micro sensor domain, but for different applications. I am one of the projects which I am confident, I will be able to commercialize is which I am currently working on is the radiation therapy, the cancer, the radiation. There are no easy way to actually detect the amount of radiation the patient sees. Now, they do a lot of simulations. They do, they use certain technologies, but what we are developing can accurately measure the profile of radiation that the body sees, and so that we can pinpoint your radiation, and with accurate measurement, you can have a much better radiation therapy. So that is a platform we are developing based on organic materials and all that, which are all flexible sensors. And there I hold a US patent right now, and that's the one which we are trying to develop as a product and commercialize that for the medical radiation application. So I think that is how it has been. On one hand, working with big large companies for in those sectors where academia cannot really compete with them, so it's better to join hands with them. In the other space, the micro sensors, the nano sensors kind of a domain, which are more like applications for societal problems. So this is how I concentrate on my research. The two dimensions I have for the research. Most of my PhD students work on one of these two kinds of problems.
I remember you were also instrumental in starting at IIT Delhi a whole incubator, encouraging students at all levels to participate in the process of creating, incubating new technologies, commercializing. That's very exciting. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I had an opportunity to serve as the director of IIT Delhi for 6 years. So one of my, always thinkings is our institutions have become very homogeneous, when it comes to their functioning. The multidisciplinarity is very rare to find in Indian institutions. We have a very fragmented higher education system. For example, for medicine, we have separate schools. For engineering, we have separate schools. For agriculture, separate. For pharmacy, separate. For sciences, separate. For management, separate. I think that's not helping us, whereas problems don't come with a disciplinary tag. Problems are problems. And because we have siloed the higher education system into so many sort of disciplines, often the collaborations become difficult. And as a result, taking any research all the way up to a product stage, becomes pretty challenging in our higher educational institutions. I, as a individual researcher, was successful because I was able to connect with all these people, form those groups, and do things successfully in at least some of these cases. But I thought, can we replicate that model what I was able to do as an individual at the institutional level. So that was one of my ambitions. So that was, what drove me to take up the position in IIT Delhi as the director. And I had, some of those thoughts which I thought I should implement at a larger scale and lead these institutions in that direction. So at IIT Delhi, the first thing I did was I started a program called Faculty Interdisciplinary Research Project Scheme, FIRP as we called it. We said if two faculty members from two different departments or domain knowledge come together and work on a problem which is well defined, then institute would provide them some seed grant. So that was a scheme that we launched just to encourage collaborations across the domains, across the disciplines, so that I always took this view that if you solve the problem of bringing people together, I think they will solve all the other problems. So the first thing as an administrator I was keen on doing was to incentivize people to work with each other, make them come out of their comfort zones, interact with each other. So that scheme helped very significantly. Many people, we funded at least 50 projects, involving more than two or three departments, and hundreds of faculty members started to form groups and work together in at the intersection of different disciplines. And then we extended this scheme to institutions outside. I went and met with the director, All India Institute of Medical Sciences. I went and met with the chairman of DRDO, went and met with the director general, the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, with many people, many institutions in Delhi. I went and met with them. And then we had a similar agreement. We fund our faculty, they fund their faculty, so that engineering, medicine will come together, engineering and agriculture sectors will come together. So we brought all these institutions together. And then we, in fact, that was an initiative that we took, which eventually led to Government of India starting a scheme for cluster projects in cities. The Delhi cluster got formed out of some of those efforts, and then the Delhi cluster got funded by the Principal Scientific Advisor's office. So one led to the other. But I was very keen on the making people from diverse disciplines come together, and that has been very successful. And when once we I always talk about these unlike minds. I felt that we need to bring these unlike minds together. To me, unlike was in terms of disciplinary knowledge, the unlike in terms of different disciplines coming together, unlike in terms of people with different attitudes coming together. That is where academia industry collaborations I pushed very aggressively at IIT Delhi. We started an industry day. During my time, we created a position of Dean Corporate Relations, and so we started to connect with industries very aggressively. So because that is what an unlike minds in terms of different attitudes, sort of a thing. And I also said unlike minds in terms of different cultures. So during my time, the international programs at IIT Delhi, we significantly enhanced them. We wrote a proposal to Government of India, so for IITs to collaborate with ASEAN countries. So we started that ASEAN PhD program. And so that, in fact, I was there along when it was launched, along with the Minister of Education, Minister for External Affairs, on the same platform where we announced that all IITs will start working with students from ASEAN countries. And then we started a 500 PhD fellowship program for international students. We said, anyone who want from outside the country wants to do PhD at IIT Delhi, we would provide all the support and stipends and all of that. So 500 PhD fellowships we announced for international students. So that was again because of this unlike kind of a concept. And my worry was our institutions being very homogeneous, no innovation will come out. So bringing these industries together, bringing different disciplines together, bringing different cultures together, I think institutions need to become that melting pots, where new ideas will come about. And that is exactly what happened. IIT Delhi filed as many patents in my time as the director as the previous 55 years. Previous 55 years,
Wow.
IIT had filed about 500 patents. During my 5 years, we actually filed more than 500 patents. I think that was a kind of a quantum jump we saw in generation of new ideas and the new ways of doing things. And we also raised a lot of money during my time. We approached alumni. We started the endowment fund. And because, to support all of these initiatives, you need resources. As a director, I thought my role is, basically to recruit the best people, bring them together and make them work together as a group and provide resources to them. So these were the things that I was focusing on. I also recruited every third faculty member at IIT Delhi. Today is somebody who was recruited during my time as the director. I think some of these definitely made an impact to the institute. Institute started to move forward even in terms of rankings and every other way. We saw a progression towards the better rankings and better systems and more money and that sort of a thing. So the things really took off at IIT Delhi. And we also started to support all this growth. We couldn't have accommodated all this growth within the existing, disciplinary kind of boundaries and the same department, same centers. So we opened new academic units. During my time, at least 10 new academic units came into existence, either through, change of the composition. Some schools were, some centers were not functioning well, so we closed them down, and in their place we started newer centers, keeping up with the modern changes that are currently taking place. And so a lot of multidisciplinary kind of centers. We created a school for interdisciplinary research, and we created a department of design, because I again felt that IITs are too focused on, too narrowly focused on engineering. To make an impact in the society, you need to be a little bit broad based. So we started a department of design, so that engineers and designers can work together to develop products. And so, for example, the design is becoming very critical now in all of what we do. So aesthetics are very important, and IIT is not getting to that area. With so many startups happening now, I thought that was very important. So we started a department of design at IIT Delhi, and also a school of public policy, because policy and technology need to go hand in hand. And that is where we started a new school of public policy. So many such new entities, have all been driving the growth. We also started a center for electric vehicles, CART we called it, and that's again doing very well at IIT Delhi right now. I think many of these initiatives made a sea change to the way the institute functions, and I hope some of these schools over a period of time will make a mark in the education space. And I'm confident things will go in that direction.
I heard about this from my friends and colleagues all over Silicon Valley, not just from people from India, but also many American entrepreneurs as well as venture capitalists. So it is the work you started is clearly getting noticed around the world. And I truly appreciate that you don't just stop at the boundaries within the engineering faculty or even within India to bring together our neighboring countries in Asia. What was your inspiration for bringing all this together?
I think my inspiration was also the American education system. That is where American schools do things very differently. Even if you go to any, even second tier, third tier American universities, you have people coming from all over the world interacting with each other, and the kind of connect they also have with the industries. For example, at UCLA, I saw that all the problems that we were working on were things which were generated, through industry collaboration. Somebody would come to you and say that, we are doing this processing, we are making these devices, and these devices are failing, there are some yield problems, we don't understand what is happening, can you help us understand? So that is how most of the problems started there. And that was the kind of a strong connect that these institutions have established with the society, or with these industries, have really helped these institutions. And people coming from all over the world working with each other, learning from each other. I think that is something which is missing in the Indian academic system. We have become so much inward looking. For example, in IITs, even to support a PhD student who is not an Indian, is such a big challenge, because the question is a public money. How can you spend providing scholarships to international students? These things were not even allowed. So we were able to do that because during my time we successfully pitched for this institution of eminence scheme, and IIT Delhi was one of the first three institutions in the country to be selected for the institution of eminence during my time. So that gave us some additional funds, and those funds, we, because it was there as part of the project proposal, we were able to spend it in creating those international student programs. And in fact, I was also the first uh, person from the IIT system to write a letter to ministry asking for permission for IIT Delhi to open a campus in Middle East. In fact, I made the groundwork when we were doing that ASEAN program. I also connected with a lot of ambassadors from Middle East, with a kind of an idea to create start an IIT Delhi extension campus in the Middle East, so that we can admit students there, recruit world class faculty there, connect them with the parent campus in India, bring these students who are admitted there to come and stay for a year on the Indian campus, so that they mix with the Indian students in the Indian campuses. That is also a good learning for them, coming from various parts of the world and joining this campus in the Middle East. And that eventually took some time and all that, but finally, it reached the PMO, and then they woke up to the fact that this is something IITs should do, and now you see all that push happening for IITs opening campuses outside. I personally feel Indian institutions have a lot to learn from the American universities. There are of course challenges in the American system. The financial models what Indian institutions have, what American institutions have, are very diverse. The that burden on the students in the American system, in terms of student loans and all that, is something that is not necessary. In fact, Australia follows a much better model, when it comes to student financing than US or India. Indian institutions don't even have a financial model. Because we don't have a financial model, we are solely dependent on government of India for the funding, and that is hurting these institutions very badly. American universities have become too much privatized, so the now of course the endowment funds and other things are there in the American system, but the student burden, in terms of loans, is still pretty high in America. Australia has a program called HELP, Higher Education Loan Program, which is working very well. So there is something to learn from these best practices followed in some of these countries, and then use a model for India, which suits the Indian condition. And I think things need to change significantly in India for us to regain that leadership in sciences, in engineering, in technology, so that India can start to aspire for Nobel Prizes and other things.
Now that you are with a private institution, the Birla Institute of Technology and Science, which already has a campus, I believe, in Dubai, and multiple campuses, do you see that the private education system in India could be able to do that, to be able to bring about these kinds of international collaborations and bring about technical as well as industrial prosperity?
That's a good point. While the government institutions are struggling because of the lack of autonomy, financial model, and all that, in the private sector, at least in bits, I see there is a financial model. But that financial model to me is a little bit skewed, in the sense that 70% of revenues in bits, basically come from the tuition fee. And the rest 30% again is a tuition fee, but collected from the working professionals in the industry and all of that. I don't consider that as a good financial model. I think that is where, in fact, I have already spoken with Kumar Mangalam Birla, who is our chancellor. Who is a stalwart. I mean, if you look at the industry space in India, I mean, the $65 billion empire, the Aditya Birla Group, he single-handedly, built that and took that group to such great heights. A great man, I'm fortunate to be interacting with him and reporting to him and discussing with him on all of these points. So we have converged on this concept of diversifying the financial model. We don't want tuition fee alone to support the institution. So we wanted, more like, let's say, what happens in Stanford or, MIT kind of places, where you have, let's say, at least one third of your revenues coming from the tuition fee, one third of your revenues coming from the endowment funds, the interest on the endowment funds, and one third of the money coming from the overheads on the research projects and other kinds of activities that we do in the institute. So I want to reduce the tuition fee burden on the students by raising an endowment fund. In fact, we are in the process of launching $100 million endowment fund for BITS Pilani, and we have already been in talks with many of our alumni, and many tell me that $100 million for BITS is not a big deal. There are multiple billionaires, and there are 14 unicorns that have come out of the BITS Pilani alumni. They have been responsible for 14 unicorns, including a decacorn. And there are at least 100 people I met with who have had $100 million kind of exits out of their companies. So I think with such rich network of uh, alumni, I don't think BITS should be charging such a huge fee from the students and turning away the merit. That's the last thing we should be doing. So we will be launching that endowment fund pretty soon. We are making the groundwork for that, and then that endowment will support the scholarships to all the needy students. This will be need based, need not be need blind at this stage, but at least if somebody, based on their family income, if we decide to get that person, we should be able to offer the scholarship, because the admissions in BITS are entirely merit based. There is no other channel to get into BITS. We conduct that BITSAT exam, which is as difficult as the JEE exam, and we admit about 1.5 lakh students take that exam. We admit about 3,500 students. So we want all the top rankers in BITSAT to come to IIT and not go to other kind of institutions in the country. So the scholarship is one thing that we are doing there. The research culture also we are growing in the institute right now, and we are establishing multiple centers of excellence. We are connecting with the Aditya Birla group to start with, so that they can also support research in these institutions through whatever kind of technologies they want to collaborate us with. And these are the kinds of changes that I am bringing about, so that we diversify the financial model and make merit the sole criterion for students to come to BITS, not their family background or not their, the fee paying capacity or anything like that. So I think this would happen, will take a couple of years, but that's a direction that we will be moving towards. And the research culture needs to grow further in BITS right now. So we are also generating a lot of scholarships for PhD students. And in fact, I am very excited that in the next 1 2 days, you will see a public announcement of a PhD program, which is very unique for India. That program, we are calling it PhD Startup Track. And what happens today is all PhD programs in India are essentially tailored to produce university professors. So in India, the general misconception is, that you do PhD if you want to become a professor. So we are saying that PhD is not necessarily to become a professor. PhD can also be to become an entrepreneur. So that is a kind of a change in mindset we are bringing about, that we will be admitting students on the projects where they have reached a certain level of technology readiness levels. And then there we will associate these PhD students with the goal that these PhD students, after working on such high TRL projects, can eventually take that project to the market as a startup. So we are looking for more PhD students who have that aptitude to start companies and who have that aptitude to become entrepreneurs. So from the beginning, the kind of coursework we provide them, the kind of projects we make them work on, they will all be the ones where they can start a company eventually. So that is something that we are starting now as a new PhD track. And we have already been able to tie up with multiple VCs and even the internal projects that we have, so that we will be able to, our goal is to create at least 100 startups through the PhD students we admit in this track. Writer-wise, right now, today in the country, there are about 300,000 PhDs doing PhD in all the higher educational institutions. How many PhDs you see in the entrepreneurship space? you can actually, count on your fingers. So the things have been so bad because the PhDs typically, graduate and look for a postdoctoral position, or look for a faculty position, but nobody is venturing into the entrepreneurship space because of various reasons here. So that is one change in culture that we want to bring about through the BIT system. In fact, BITS has always been known for its innovations in the educational space. Whether you talk in terms of the dual degree programs, BITS has been doing it for a few decades now. A student who gets admission for the bachelor's program in mechanical engineering can do a master's program, an MSc in chemistry or an MSc in biology. So that sort of a combination is possible today only in BITS. I see so many BITS students, doing BE in a bachelor's of engineering in, let's say, mechanical engineering, and at the same time doing MSc in biology kind of a thing. So that sort of flexibility exists in the system. And so I think continuing on those sort of innovations, this PhD program, in my opinion, can be a game changer, will set a new trend, for all such programs in the country. The idea is to, get into more deep technology kind of entrepreneurship space. India has enough unicorns. We have like 107, 108 unicorns, but none of them is in the technology space. They're all, currently business model innovations, more of an aggregator kind of a model, but none which is actually selling a product and making money. So their products are, of course, services. Their products are these apps, fintech space, those e-commerce. I think that's good. There is nothing wrong in that. But time has come for us now to create, unicorns in the technology space, in the deep technology space. That can happen only through the PhD students or through students who have worked on a technology for a period of time. And that can be either by working in such an industry for a long time and then coming out and starting a company, or trained to work on a certain technology as part of your PhD training and receive all the necessary help and support, even financially, to start your own venture after PhD. In this PhD program, we will also be creating seed fund for them to build prototypes and all of that. So this is a new program that we are starting in BITS. I think let's see how things will progress in that direction.
Oh, I really commend your efforts. When I look at the history of Silicon Valley, it was truly people like you who, at the academic institutions like Stanford, changed the culture of education. Uh, Hewlett Packard, much later Intel, more recently Google, and a host of companies came out of young minds and with a very clear focus on taking research into making it real. Truly, that's an amazing effort you have, and all power to you and all the students. So much change is going on. Do you have any advice on how a student should select, or how do they plan their career?
A large fraction of students, I would say 90% or above, are stopping their careers with just a undergraduate degree, BTech. They don't even want to pursue higher education. And if at all they are pursuing, it's for MBA kind of degrees. Very few at IIT Delhi, less than 5% of our students are going for higher education. When I say higher education, research, PhD and things like that, less than 5% right now, which is hurting all the innovation capabilities of these students, because with a BTech degree, you don't understand anything. You have just scratched the surface, when it comes to technologies and all of that. With that, the only areas where you can innovate are in IT, e-commerce, fintech, and those sort of spaces. Whereas there are huge opportunities waiting to be explored, in the biotechnology area, in the nanotechnology area, in the quantum technology area, in the AI, ML kind of areas that you cannot do with a simple bachelor's kind of a degree. And that is what is hurting innovation in all those other sectors. So as a result, the only jobs we seem to be generating are the IT jobs. There are no other jobs we are generating, because there is not much innovation happening in any of these other areas, because our top talent isn't even pursuing anything beyond the BTech kind of degrees. And because jobs are available in the IT area, everybody is just taking up those IT jobs. And because jobs are available there, everybody wants to take up disciplines where they can eventually work in IT. I think we have gotten into this vicious circle. And a few of these students, coming out of that vicious circle, moving ahead, and getting into these deep technology kind of spaces, and then creating innovation there, and creating companies there, doing interesting things in those domains, I think will open up opportunities in those sectors too. And that is when, once there are jobs available in those sectors, I think more and more students would go towards those areas, and that is how innovation can happen in some of these domains too.
Well, Professor, it's been a joy talking to you and listening to you, learning from you. And to people out here, I'm always looking to hear from you, to learn about what's happening, not just in the US, but around the world. We are in a time of transition. So much is changing all around us, not just in high tech, as in IT or in data science, but in various areas from quantum computing to the advances in neuroscience, neurotechnologies. Practically everything is shifting really fast, and we have an obligation to make it work in every possible areas using multidisciplinary approaches. So thanks again, Professor Rao, and I
Thank you.
hope to talk to you again in the near future and see how many of your efforts lead to fruition.
Thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you again.